Natalie is wondering if she has the wrong link. So I guess I'll send her the right link.
Okay, great. I think that we are now live. Um, we can also work on that. So, good afternoon, everyone. We have another exciting year of the Motor Vehicle and Transportation Subcommittee ahead of us. I am your brand new chair, Vaughn Stewart, and I am excited to work with all of you. I asked Chairman Corman to assemble the best and brightest minds in the entire House of Delegates to be on the subcommittee, and he obliged. So I know that we're going to have a productive and a fun few months. I want to start before we dive into the bills with just a couple of ground rules and reminders. First, the true chairman of the committee, Patrick Tracy, is our one and only counsel and our guiding light. He will be working on most of the amendments and try to loop him in if you have any amendments to any of the bills. My legislative aide, who will be helping me run these subcommittee members, his name is Maddie Mara. You're welcome to email her by emailing my general house email address if you need anything. And finally, we will, of course, be inviting Matt Michler from our good, our former best friend and now still our good friend in his new role at MDOT to help us weigh in and keep us on track as always. If other advocates want to be invited, they can, of course, reach out to me to get the Zoom link. But my general policy, and those of you who were on my previous subcommittee assignment will know, is that advocates and lobbyists are not subcommittee members. And so we are going to have a pretty strict policy about them only speaking when called on, them only receiving links if they've asked me for one, and they have to keep their cameras off. They also cannot use the virtual hand raising function if they have something to say. Um, so if you know if we really need their advice and we really need their input, we'll ask them. But otherwise, they will not be part of our discussion. Um, Other general ground rules: try to be here on time. We have the most bills of any subcommittee in the entire House of Delegates. So we're going to be working a lot this session. We're going to get to know each other even better. And in order to be as efficient and productive as possible, it would be awesome if everyone could be here on time. One thing I would ask for you guys just to give me input on whenever you get a chance is when you would like to have these meetings. And so obviously we'll always have them after bill hearings on Thursday, but we have some flexibility as to whether we have them immediately after so we can be, done as soon as possible, or whether we want to create some sort of buffer. Today, I scheduled this for 30 minutes after we finish, which was kind of a happy medium. But if people have any strong feelings one way or another on that topic, feel free to reach out. And just in general, my door is always open. So if you have thoughts about bills, if you really like a bill, you really hate a bill, you really think there should be an amendment, you really hate an amendment that's been proposed, just let me know. We'll, of course, have a policy of holding bills for at least a week for people that want to hold stuff. And as everyone knows, that policy changes a little bit as we get closer to crossover and then closer to sine die. But in general, err on the side of letting me know when issues arise. I think that's all the housekeeping notes I've got. Delegate Healy has a question.
Okay, I took off the mute. I just want to say thank you. As you know, the local government subcommittee meets as needed. It's usually very short because they're almost all local courtesy bills, and we can move through them quickly. That being said, the time when we meet would probably most likely be immediately following our bill hearings on this day of the week, Thursday. So if I could have that little slice of time on those days when we happen to have to meet for like probably no more than a half an hour anyway. So I just let that be for the future.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Healy, for raising that. It's a good reminder that we do share membership, including the chair of the local government committee herself, and membership with the local government subcommittee that also meets on Thursdays. So yes, in general, I think the smart move, because they do have fewer bills, is to let them go first after the bill hearing, and then that'll give us some time to kind of get settled in our office before we go thereafter. Any other questions about just kind of the ground rules? This is sort of serving as our organizational meeting and our first kind of substantive discussion of bills. All right. Well, seeing none, we will jump into the action, and we're going to start with House Bill 7. Those of you who were on the subcommittee last year will remember this one really well, but it was also got a fair amount of conversation on the floor. This is the Idaho Stop Bill from Delegate Boyce, from Vice Chair Boyce. So this is basically the bill that says that this sometimes is called the Stop as Yield Bill, which allows cyclists to use stop signs as yield signs rather than as stop signs. And as I said on the floor last year, I always found this idea to be extremely counterintuitive, and it was a little scary to me at first. And then I dove into the research and I realized that the overwhelming consensus from anyone who's looked at this is that allowing cyclists to just roll through the stops is actually safer. And it has to do with how the human eye works and how our peripheral vision picks up things in motion versus things that are not moving quite as fast. So we did pass this last year. I think it received an overwhelming positive vote in the committee, a little bit more mixed on the floor. But with that, I will stop and ask Patrick if I missed anything about the bill.
No. That's, I think, we do have some new members, but they were on the committee.
Right.
Correct characterization, I think. And they have to yield. They still have to yield. I think that's an important element. The bicycle rider.
Right.
I'll move the bill.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second.
Oh, wait, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Yeah. Any other discussion on the bill before we vote? Delegate Davis.
Yes, thank you. I took a look at the bill, and there were some amendments to make sure that liability was clear and who had the right of way. And they did change it to a 2-lane street, limited to 2-lane street, right, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay. And my only concern is I've got 50-mile-an-hour roads in the country with bike trails going across them. And so I've got to make that mark for Charles County that it could be really bad for Charles County. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Delegate Terraza.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Chairman, when Delegate Davis said there are amendments, do you mean changes from last year, or are there amendments that I should have here?
I think she meant a change from last year's, the
Okay,
original
good.
version
Okay,
of last year's bill.
Just making
Yeah.
sure I hadn't missed those. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have any amendments here on the floor right now. Okay, great. Any other thoughts before we vote? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 7, please raise your hand or otherwise signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, one opposed. That bill is going to receive a favorable recommendation from the subcommittee. We will move on to House Bill 191. This is Delegate Foley's bill on electronic towing notices. So if you remember from this bill, from the hearing, the basic gist here is that right now there's a requirement that towing operators provide snail mail notifications to people whose vehicle has been towed, which of course takes a few days to accomplish. And so people who have their vehicles towed routinely, and I know people this has happened to, routinely assume that their car has been stolen when it's actually been towed and can't really figure out exactly where they need to go to get their car back in the immediate aftermath of the tow. This bill would seek to solve this problem by essentially allowing immediate notice or relatively immediate notice, because the towing operators would be able to work with MVA to send email notices out to people whose vehicles have been towed to let them know. And if there's no response to the email, then there would still be a paper notice provision. So it's not necessarily in lieu of paper notice. It's just trying to provide faster notice to people faster. Yes, Delegate Healy.
Yeah, I just want to know, does MVA have email addresses for everybody, or is this just for people who have taken the time to give it to them?
I think it's the latter. Patrick, do you know? I believe you have the
The
option to
latter.
provide your email.
It's the latter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, people's email changes and everything. So there's not a guarantee that people's email is up to date, even if they have provided an email to MVA. So this would not benefit every single Marylander, because
Well,
some emails.
that's why having the snail mail as a fallback is a good idea.
Exactly. Delegate Taraz.
That was my question. So they still have the snail mail and the electronic.
That's right. So in the event that MVA has an email address, they would first try to contact the person via email and solicit a response back. So the email would say something like, reply to this email to confirm receipt. And if they don't do that for whatever reason, or if there is no email address on file with MVA, then the process would proceed as it does in current law, which is the snail mail notice.
So when Delegate Healy was saying just people who bothered to this is giving your email address to MBA, like in what context would you give that to?
I think that there's an option to provide your email to MVA at various times when you interact with them. You can go on the MVA website right now and update your email address. You can also do it when you renew your license or when you get your license for the first time.
I think pretty much any transaction. we
Yeah,
have the opportunity.
exactly. Or you could probably even do it. I don't know. Even when you got your emissions test, you could probably tell them your email address. I'm not sure about that, but there's plenty of opportunities, and I'm sure that once the public starts to become aware of this towing electronic notice, that probably would be an inducement for more people to register their emails with MBA.
It helps to get a notice if you don't get it any other way from MVA, because sometimes you don't realize that you're supposed to get your license renewed or your tags renewed, all that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that my MVA function I've personally used and it's very nice. All right. Any other questions or comments about this bill?
Move it.
Bill. All right. I
Second.
hear a motion from Delegate Jacobs, a second from Delegate Morgan. Any other discussion before we vote on House Bill 191? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. That bill will receive a unanimous recommendation from the subcommittee. We've now got two bills that I think would be more prudent if we just sort of pursued them for discussion purposes only, because I think we've got some amendments that we need to discuss. I don't think we're quite ready to vote, but in the interest of just kind of moving our agenda along as quickly as possible, I thought we could spend a little bit of time discussing them now. The first one is House Bill 1, which we passed last year. So it would have otherwise been in kind of the HB 7 posture of moving it out relatively quickly. It also passed, I think, overwhelmingly, if not unanimously. This bill is from Delegate Ebersol, and it basically provides human trafficking training to MDOT employees. The idea here is that we want folks who work for MDOT, who are on the roads, and who could potentially provide help for victims of human trafficking to be trained about what they should be on the lookout for and to be trained on how they should respond. We passed this last year. It had a relatively minimal fiscal note last year, but we were all sort of alarmed to see that it came in with a fiscal note. I think it's like 425,000 this year. So we've got some amendments in the works to try to cut back on that fiscal note, given the budget and everything. So I was just going to briefly describe what we're thinking there and then take any comments. The first source of the fiscal note is that MDOT seems to have believed that they would be required, or the fiscal note assumes that MDOT would be responsible for creating the plan, but the text of the bill is pretty clear that they could either create the training themselves or identify an existing training. The bill sponsor has assured me that there are a bunch of free training programs out there that they could use. They wouldn't have to create their own. So that's 125,000 worth of the fiscal note right there that I think we can just kind of lop off. Now, if MDOT thinks it's, they need clarifying language that they don't need to create it, I'm not opposed to that, but I don't think that they're going to actually have to create the training. The other more thorny problem is that the fiscal note assumes that the employees are going to have to use overtime pay to do this outside of working hours. The reason the fiscal note assumes this and the agency assumes this is because the bill only gives the agency a 3-month window to complete the training. So the thought is they're not going to have enough time within 3 months, so they're going to have to do it after hours, which means they're going to have to pay overtime, which is going to be a good chunk of change, roughly $300,000 worth of taxpayer money. We are going to work with the sponsor and the agency to formulate an amendment maybe by next week that does two things. One, that specifies that this training should happen during the work hours, And secondly, to give them a much longer runway to complete the training to make that doable. So we're going to push back the time they have to do it to, I believe, January 1, 2027. The bill will go into effect this summer, so that'll give them a year and a half to do it. The agency has told me that means that they would they'd be able to basically stick this into the existing training time that employees get if they have that year and a half runway to do it. And so that basically eliminates the fiscal note, which is always nice when we can do.
Yep.
So with that, any questions? I see Delegate Terraza has one. Take it away.
Actually, I have two.
Perfect.
Okay, so one of them is during working hours, going to change whether there's free training available. Do we know that?
No, it wouldn't affect it. The free training just exists out there anyway. So whether they do it during the work hours or not within the work hours, if anything, this makes it a little bit smoother because I think MDOT staff, HR staff or whatever would be there to play the video for them rather than
Oh,
sending
okay,
them
I
the link
see.
to do on their own time.
Okay, and then is the 2027, you said January 2027, or I forget when in 2077 you
Yeah,
said?
January 2027.
Is it necessary to go back that far to get rid of the fiscal note? I just hate to have that much more time. If that is not necessary, I understand the 3 months is too short, but do we need that much time to make sure it
The
doesn't?
agency says that they do need that much time to eliminate the fiscal note. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. So we'll work on getting those amendments fired up for y'all for next week. We can have another discussion on this if anyone has any questions, but we did pass it last year in basically the same form. It's just we have this kind of new issue that we want to grapple with. All right, cool. Well, seeing no other hands up, we're going to move to our last topic of the day. This is our very own Delegate Guyton's HB 178, which is, we just heard last week, this is a bill that prohibits parking on a bike lane, is the quick summary. Parking or otherwise stopping or standing, standing, or parking in a bike lane or bicycle path. And this is also going to, I think, involve some amendments that have not been totally prepared yet. There's also been some proposed amendments that I think not all of the parties are in agreement on, is my understanding. So I thought it would be prudent to just kind of have a discussion here of what you guys think about this. But essentially, my understanding of where we're at right now is that there is maybe already an existing emergency vehicle exception for this. There is a paratransit amendment that I think the sponsor is okay with that needs to be drafted. And then there is a third amendment that the Maryland Motor Truck Association has suggested to exempt delivery trucks when they're making their deliveries. This is apparently something that New York City has adopted. So before I hand it over to the bill sponsor to correct how I've messed this up, I just want to kick it to Patrick to give us any or the other more color. I know that Patrick's been looking into sort of where this has been placed in the code and how we handle other types of similar situations. So I wanted him to regale us a little bit with his wisdom before we get started.
Well, one thing I would want to highlight is a couple of testimonies, one from Bike More, one from Transportation Alliance, notes that they're, to paraphrase, there's some cases where they can go into a bike lane as necessary, and that exceptions already exist in Maryland code for these. That includes emergency vehicle access, law enforcement instruction if a police officer directs you, direction from a traffic control device, and disabled vehicles. So some of the discussion that I've seen on some of the amendments may be unnecessary. Now the chair was right. We were talking about where in the code this is set into a bill. This is what, GG, I think, which means there's about 35 or so already prohibitions of where you can stop, stand, and park. And my sense is, and I'm going to have to find these areas where these are exempted, but I know where some of them are. My sense is that we may not need all of these amendments, that it may already be in the code because none of these other ones have the amendments. They have some modifications. A couple of them have modifications, and we might need one for shoulders, but we can discuss.
Great, that's helpful. Yeah, so my understanding is basically there's a bunch of different things in code that you can't stand or stop or park in, and all of those kind of have these global exceptions. And since we're sticking this in that part of the code, maybe we don't need to like layer on as many exceptions as we want to. And the only other thing I was going to say too, or Patrick, you can help me. I forget what the maximum fine is here. I know that the prepayment penalty, according to the district court, would be between $60 and $70 per offense. So I just thought that's helpful context for people to know.
I'm pretty sure the maximum fine is the standard 500.
Okay.
The fallback 500, if you will.
Great. Cool. So yeah, let's kick it off. Let's chat about it. It looks like we've got Delegate Jacobs up first.
All right, now, I am having owned a fleet of trucks at one time. I'm very knowledgeable about the need for the parking for deliveries and pickups, and very concerning to me that exists. Otherwise, I mean, what is the alternative if you're not allowed to stop for a brief period of time and make a delivery or a pickup?
Is that rhetorical?
Yeah, I mean, what
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, I think,
what's the solution? Because
Right.
We all know when you got businesses lined up on a street, that require pickup or deliveries, it's already a problem, with traffic and everything else as this. And I'm just wondering, if you didn't take that amendment, what's the alternative?
All right. Thank you. We've got the bill sponsor next up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Uh-oh.
Chair. I am having trouble talking. I'm going to try. I'm fine with the amendments that came in during the hearing. The problem with the freight amendment that they brought to me, happy to work with them, and I've told them this 1,000 times, but they will want an hour of stopping to deliver your Amazon packages. And I just feel that is absolutely happy medium. That might be something we can work with. The other thing is that the folks who are already doing this in the states around us and in Baltimore City say they're not being ticketed. They just want protection. So I'm absolutely willing for this group to work on it. And thank you, Patrick, for what you've done. I just feel like the extreme.
Okay. So I don't know about you guys. On my end, Delegate Guyton, you were kind of cutting back in and out a little bit with some sort of technological feedback, which certainly happens to the best of us in the house with given the House Office Building Wi-Fi. What I think I took you to understand is that you're willing to work with the truck folks on some sort of amendment, but that the time frame that they provided you so far was that they wanted an exception to park for an hour, and then that seems kind of long for you, but that you're willing to kind of compromise. Is that a fair representation of what you said? Okay, cool. Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm uncomfortable with the new law having a $500 penalty. So I'd like to work on that if we can.
Okay.
Well, it's not a $500 penalty. It's a max 500,
Yeah.
which is the standard minimum for motor vehicle laws. And would you say it was 60 or 70?
Yeah.
The prepaid
Yeah. So
penalty?
how it works, in my understanding, and Patrick knows a lot more about this than I do, as will be the case for almost every issue we take up this session. But when you set the maximum, the district court then takes whatever that maximum is and then determines a prepayment penalty that's somehow equivalent or proportional to the maximum. And so even though the maximum is 500, people can just prepay at 60 or 70. So almost no one will ever actually be charged $500, but that's the minimum maximum, if you will. That's the lowest maximum amount that we can put in the code for a transportation related offense. But no one, unless it's like, I guess, a particularly egregious infraction and you got to go to court, no one would actually ever pay $500. Is that fair to say, Patrick?
Yeah, well, yes, unless, see, the key word that the chair said is prepay. So if you got a ticket for this and you just wrote a check, sent it in the mail, $60, $70, and you're done. But if you challenge it and you go to court, the judge, then all of a sudden the prepay is out the window. The judge can do anything he or she wants.
Up to 500.
Up to 500.
That makes it worse for me. I mean, we shouldn't penalize someone for challenging a ticket. That's for sure.
Well, it's up to the judge. There's nothing we can really do. I mean, I wouldn't say nothing, but
Yeah, I think we can set a penalty.
we can set a penalty. That's correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Delegate Jacobs.
So anyhow, I'm glad to hear that the sponsor's willing to work with the time. I don't know that an hour is the right time frame. That seems a little excessive to me too, but I'd like to hear the justification from Maryland Motor Truck of that, the time frame needed. I'm glad to hear the sponsor's willing to talk about it, and I think it probably should be a little shorter time frame, but at least be permitted use. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. That's helpful. Delegate Healy.
Yeah, I agree with what Jay just said. But I also think that talking with them will there may be cases where if you're unloading a big truckload of furniture or a beer truck or something where you have one guy carrying stuff in and out of the store until he gets it all in, might take a little longer than just delivering 1 or 2 packages, or I think there may be circumstances, and I think a discussion with the sponsor would be great, because you could take into account, maybe find some kind of compromise. I think that's a great idea.
Great. Delegate Davis, you have something else, or is that a old hand? Okay. Delegate Terrazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I want to say that I agree with Delegate Davis. I'm concerned about that, and I understand that might be standard in the code, but I am concerned about a penalty if you take it to court and that getting up so high. But my other question would be, and this is maybe because I've now had to move my son twice in the city, Baltimore City. What happens if how would somebody moving themselves? So like we had our own truck or van, and I think it looks like Delegate Guyton might have an answer, but I just want to make sure, like we had to pull over in front of the place in order to, now there wasn't a bike lane, but there could have been, and we had to just to get, some furniture out real quick. So I just want to check on that, but it looks like Delegate Guyton has an answer for me.
Yeah, take it over, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you. I'll try. So just like in Annapolis, you'll see that it says no parking here for this amount of time between 9 and 4 on this day. Also in Baltimore, pretty much everywhere. You can reserve those spots through the county, the local jurisdiction. So you have.
It's in and out,
Nobody
Delegate
can hear
Guyton.
me?
It's in and out. I
Darn
think what you're saying is that
Okay, yeah,
there are different parking rules in certain municipalities that, yeah, okay. It looks like you also are, okay. Yeah, we'll try with your other device, but it sounds like maybe you're trying to say that municipalities can sort of give a grace period for a certain period of time.
I think the motor truckers have said you can also get permits in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's right. There's also, there's loading zones. Yeah, sorry, I think Delegate Guyton's back with us.
I'm so sorry, between my voice and electronics. Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. You can get a permit for that. So you can basically have a reserved spot in front of wherever you're trying to move in. Takes a little effort, but it also gets you out of getting ticketed for parking in, non-resident zones and all the rest of that. There are ways around that.
Got it. Okay. All right. Any other comments on either sort of theoretical amendments or broad strokes thoughts on the bill? All right, seeing none. That
Mr.
will be it.
Chairman?
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just clarify before we sign off that when I was talking about the baseline fine of $500, that's the lowest fine in the code, and that applies to every prepay penalty, not just these, every prepay penalty. If you do the prepay penalty, put it in the mail, you're done. Every one of them, not just this. If you go to court, then the prepay is out the window. And the judge will usually probably give you the prepay penalty if you're found guilty, but he's got discretion to go up to the maximum, he or she. So just want to be clear on that. It's not special to this. It's all through the transportation code.
Right. Delegate Davis.
But Patrick, we could specify what the penalty would be, right?
It can be done by the General Assembly. Yes, we rarely do that though.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've gotten pushback in the past, I remember, from the court system, because they like to have, obviously, as much autonomy as possible to set these things pursuant to judicial discretion. So when we zero in on one fine, the judiciary tends to come in and say, no, no, no. All right. Any other comments before we sign off? All right, well, that will do it for today. Thank you all again. Looking forward to a great session with all of you. We almost made it right at the 30-minute mark. This will probably go down as one of our shorter meetings of the session, but it was an enjoyable one nonetheless. Hope everyone has a great evening, and I'll see you on the floor tomorrow morning.